I was very enamored of the quality of the TV series, but it came about because I'd toured around Europe, and I'd been to a lot of cons and shows, and I had quite a few shows particularly in Germany, and I was asked by some of the Tolkien fans who were also interested in Game of Thrones if I painted anything in connection with Game of Thrones. It came to a head when I was asked to do some interviews with celebrities, primarily from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And purely by accident, I ended up interviewing three guys, Finn Jones, Gethin Anthony, and a guy called Daniel Portman, who plays Podrick Payne in Game of Thrones. I met these guys, and their persona that you see in real life is nothing like what you experience in the TV series. Because of that, I was then asked, well, have you painted any of their pictures? Have you painted? And I thought, well, why not? Why not go down that route? I'd experienced an interview session where I interviewed the guys from The Hobbit. And I was asked prior to actually going to interview them by some of the fans if I had any portraits, could I get them signed. And I didn't have, so I had an experiment really. I'd never really painted with oil paints before, so I did a series of, I painted all of the dwarves from the Hobbit movie. I then interviewed them, and I got those celebrities to actually sign the originals and prints, which we gave away on as prizes on the network. And that concept just rolled forward into Game of Thrones. I began to paint the Game of Thrones characters. I think I started with Charles Dance, and it was really well received, and I got a lot of praise for it, and it opened me up to a new market, a new group of fan base that I hadn't really experienced before. And it was a joy. It really helped me develop as an artist. It helped me to or inspired me and pushed me to research people like Rembrandt, who I'm a great admirer of, and I learned about his techniques, and I painted a whole series of paintings in that style. Theon Greyjoy, Yara Greyjoy, Charles Dance, they just all flowed one after the other, and they were a complete joy to do. I tried very hard to capture the underlying spirit of the character, but not to portray them as fan art, but almost recreated Renaissance art. That's the story of how they came about. And I have really enjoyed doing them. I really only paint Game of Thrones and Tolkien. I don't really step too far out of that. But since then I've got a bit more interested in the vampire side of things, of the eroticism and the passion that is within the vampire whole genre. It's not just the films, it's the people you meet, it's the cosplayers, it's the fans. But I really enjoy expressing the emotion that goes along with these genres and try and bring it to the fore. So long may it continue. You get a very interesting reaction from fans because they don't expect it. They because it's a fantasy. What I try desperately to do with the art that I produce is to put it in context, but give it grounding. I suppose you would say I'm trying to reinforce the myth or reinforce. So I'm not trying to do a pictorial illustration depicting the person. Look how great and lifelike this painting is. I'm trying to create artworks that were set in the time. So it's not about the visual aspect about it. It's about trying to get the spirit and the history and to reinforce those ideas of the book by creating an artifact, if you like. And when fans see that, they get such a shock. They get very, on occasion, I've had not just once, but 2, 3, 4 times, I've had actually fans actually cry at the paintings. They get very, very emotional about it because they love it and they believe it and they relate to the paintings. And as an artist, you can't really achieve more than touch somebody's soul. You can't. It's just such a buzz. You get such a buzz out of it, and I know people get it. I know they understand it, and I appreciate that.
And is there anybody else still that you either want to go back to, or that you want to kind of work on next? Who's next in the Game of Thrones line?
Tyrion is going to be a fun one to do, but there is a lot of art produced on him. It's a I'm avoiding him at the moment because he's, of all the characters in the series, he's the one who's the most emotion. He has the most emotional involvement. He's the one who he has repressed feelings. He has a history of being an unwanted child. He has so much emotion carried within his character, and I'm not quite looking forward to going through those emotions to try and get there. He's not superficial, he runs very deep, and I think I'm going to have a hard time painting him, and some of these paintings are quite painful to produce.